Life has a strange way of convincing us that everything is heavier than it really is. A single mistake feels permanent. One awkward conversation replays in the mind for days. A rejection starts to feel like proof that we are not enough. Slowly, without realizing it, we begin carrying invisible weight everywhere we go. Pressure, expectations, fear, comparison, the exhausting need to prove ourselves to everyone around us. But what if the real problem is not life itself? What if the problem is that we have been taking every thought, every opinion, every emotion, and every situation too seriously? This audiobook is not about becoming careless. It is about becoming free. Free from overthinking, free from emotional heaviness, free from the constant pressure to control everything. Because the truth is, life becomes lighter the moment you stop turning every moment into a personal battle. And today, that journey begins. Chapter 1. The weight you were never meant to carry. Most people are tired long before the day even begins. Not physically tired, emotionally tired. They wake up already carrying yesterday's embarrassment, tomorrow's worries, and the pressure of becoming someone the world will finally approve of. Their mind never truly rests. Even during quiet moments, there is tension underneath everything. A constant mental noise asking, what if I fail? What do people think about me? Am I falling behind? Why does everyone else seem happier? And the strange part is this: most of that weight is invisible. Nobody sees the pressure you put on yourself when you walk into a room. Nobody hears the conversations happening inside your head before you send a text message. Nobody notices how much energy gets wasted replaying moments that no longer matter. But you feel it every single day. Imagine a man carrying a backpack filled with rocks everywhere he goes. At first, he barely notices the weight, but over time, his shoulders begin hurting. His posture changes. Walking becomes exhausting. Then one day, someone asks him, "Why are you carrying all those rocks?" And he says, "I thought I had to." That is how most people live emotionally. The rocks are expectations. The rocks are comparison. The rocks are fear of judgment. The rocks are guilt. The rocks are the need to always succeed. The rocks are trying to control everything. And somewhere along the way, you started believing this pressure was normal, but it is not. You were never meant to carry life this heavily. Think about children for a moment. Children fail constantly. They fall while learning to walk. They say embarrassing things. They make mistakes every day. Yet they recover quickly. They laugh easily. They move on fast. Why? Because they have not yet learned to turn every experience into a statement about their worth. Adults do the opposite. A small mistake becomes, "I'm stupid." Rejection becomes, "I'm not lovable." Failure becomes, "My life is ruined." One uncomfortable moment becomes a week of overthinking. The mind takes temporary experiences and transforms them into personal identities. That is where suffering grows. There is a difference between experiencing life and carrying life. Experiencing life means allowing moments to pass naturally. Carrying life means holding on to everything emotionally long after the moment is over. And most people are carrying far too much. A woman receives criticism at work. The conversation lasts 5 minutes, but mentally she relives it for 5 days. A student fails one exam and suddenly questions his entire future. A person gets ignored in a group conversation and spends the night wondering if everyone secretly dislikes them. The event itself is small. The emotional attachment makes it heavy. This is what overthinking does. Overthinking is not deep thinking. It is repetitive suffering. The mind keeps replaying situations because it believes replaying them will somehow create control. But instead, it creates emotional exhaustion. You can spend hours analyzing a conversation that the other person forgot within minutes. You can lose sleep over opinions that will not matter next year. You can spend your entire life trying to avoid embarrassment, only to realize nobody was paying as much attention as you imagined. One of the greatest freedoms in life is realizing that not everything deserves emotional weight. Not every opinion deserves your energy. Not every failure deserves self-hatred. Not every awkward moment deserves replay. Not every problem deserves panic. Some things deserve to be released, but many people struggle to let go because seriousness feels responsible. They think, if I stop worrying, I'll become lazy. If I stop overthinking, I'll lose control. If I stop taking things personally, I won't improve. But the opposite is usually true. People think pressure creates success. In reality, pressure often destroys clarity. When the mind is constantly overwhelmed, it becomes harder to think wisely. Small problems feel enormous. Simple decisions become stressful. Joy disappears because the brain is always preparing for disaster. And eventually people stop living. They only manage stress. Have you ever noticed how some people can go through difficult situations calmly, while others completely collapse under small pressure? The difference is rarely intelligence, it is perspective. Emotionally strong people understand something powerful. Life becomes lighter when you stop emotionally attaching yourself to every single thing. That does not mean becoming cold. It means becoming grounded. You stop seeing every inconvenience as a catastrophe. You stop making your worth dependent on outcomes. You stop giving temporary moments permanent emotional power. Imagine holding sand tightly in your hand. The harder you squeeze, the faster it slips away. Life works similarly. The more desperately you try to control every outcome, protect every image, and avoid every uncomfortable emotion, the more exhausted you become. Peace comes from loosening your grip. There is an old story about a monk walking with his student beside a river. The student asks, "Master, why do I feel so overwhelmed by life?" The monk picks up a glass of water and says, "Put a handful of salt into this glass and drink it." The student does and immediately spits it out. It tastes terrible. Then the monk takes the same amount of salt and throws it into the river. "Now drink from the river." The student drinks and says, "It tastes normal." The monk smiles. The pain in life is unavoidable, but your mind determines whether you become the glass or the river. Small minds make problems feel enormous. Calm minds create space around pain. This chapter is not asking you to ignore responsibilities. It is asking you to stop turning life into emotional warfare. You do not need to win every argument. You do not need everyone to understand you. You do not need to panic every time something goes wrong. You do not need to prove your worth every single day. Sometimes peace begins the moment you stop emotionally wrestling with everything. Here are a few practical shifts to begin releasing unnecessary weight. Stop replaying conversations before sleep. Most situations are not as important as your mind makes them seem. Separate mistakes from identity. Making a mistake does not make you a failure. Pause before reacting emotionally. Ask yourself, will this matter a year from now? Stop comparing your timeline to others. Comparison creates pressure that was never meant to exist. Allow yourself to be imperfect publicly. Freedom grows when you stop trying to appear flawless. And most importantly, learn to breathe inside unfinished moments. Not everything needs immediate fixing. Not every uncertainty needs an answer tonight. Not every emotion needs to become a crisis. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is simply let a moment exist without turning it into suffering. Reflection questions. What emotional weight have you been carrying unnecessarily? Which situations in your life became heavier because of overthinking? How much of your stress comes from reality, and how much comes from the stories your mind keeps repeating? What would your life feel like if you stopped taking every moment so personally? Tonight, before you sleep, imagine setting down the invisible backpack you have been carrying for years. The pressure, the fear, the comparison, the need to prove yourself. Imagine what it would feel like to walk through life lighter. Because that life is possible. And this is only the beginning. Most emotional pain does not come from what happens to us. It comes from the meaning we attach to what happens. Two people can experience the exact same situation, yet one moves on peacefully while the other suffers for weeks. Why? Because the mind is constantly creating stories, assumptions, and emotional conclusions. The goal of this journey is not to become emotionless. The goal is to stop allowing every little moment to control your inner state. The calmer your perspective becomes, the lighter your life feels. And once you understand how the mind personalizes everything, you begin taking your power back. Chapter 2. Why Everything Feels So Personal. Someone gives you a strange look. Immediately, the mind starts talking. Did I do something wrong? Do they dislike me? Maybe I sounded stupid. A message goes unanswered for a few hours. Now the mind creates another story. They are ignoring me. I must not matter. Something is wrong. One small criticism at work ruins your entire evening. One awkward moment replays in your head all night. One failure suddenly feels connected to your identity. This is how emotional suffering quietly grows. Not because life is constantly attacking you, but because the mind turns ordinary experiences into deeply personal events. Most people do not realize how much they live inside interpretation instead of reality. Reality is simple. Someone looked at you strangely. Interpretation says, they think badly of me. Reality. You made a mistake. Interpretation. I'm a failure. Reality. Someone disagreed with you. Interpretation. I'm rejected. The emotional reaction becomes much bigger than the actual event, and once the mind creates a painful meaning, the body reacts as if the danger is real, anxiety rises. Stress increases, confidence drops, all because of a story the mind created in seconds. Why does this happen? Because human beings naturally want acceptance. From childhood, people learn that approval equals safety. Praise feels rewarding. Rejection feels painful. Over time, the brain becomes extremely sensitive to anything that threatens self-image. That is why even small moments can feel emotionally intense. A simple comment can trigger old insecurities. A disagreement can awaken fear of abandonment. A failure can activate feelings of not being enough. Most reactions are not about the present moment alone. They are connected to emotional patterns built over years. Think about someone who constantly felt criticized growing up. As an adult, even gentle feedback may feel like a personal attack. Or someone who always needed validation. Silence from others suddenly feels unbearable. The present moment touches an old emotional wound, and the reaction becomes stronger than the situation itself. This is why self-awareness matters. You cannot heal what you do not notice. The truth is, people are rarely reacting only to reality. They are reacting to memories, fears, insecurities, and internal stories attached to reality. Imagine wearing glasses that distort everything you see. Even normal situations begin looking threatening. That is what insecurity does to perception. An insecure mind personalizes everything. If someone is quiet, it must be about me. If someone succeeds, I'm falling behind. If someone criticizes, I'm worthless. If plans change, I'm not important. The mind constantly connects neutral events to personal worth, and this becomes exhausting. There are people who spend entire days emotionally affected by tiny situations that were never truly serious. A short comment ruins their mood. A social media post triggers comparison. One uncomfortable interaction destroys their confidence for hours. Slowly, emotional stability disappears because the mind keeps handing power to external events. But emotionally strong people think differently. They understand an important truth. Not everything is about you. Sometimes people are quiet because they are tired. Sometimes messages go unanswered because life is busy. Sometimes criticism is simply feedback, not rejection. Sometimes situations happen without deeper meaning, but the ego wants to personalize everything because the ego constantly asks, "What does this say about me?" And that question creates suffering. Ego is not confidence. Ego is emotional over-identification. It is the habit of connecting every experience to identity. A confident person can fail without feeling destroyed. An insecure person turns every setback into proof of inadequacy. That is why two people can experience the same rejection differently. One says, "That didn't work out." The other says, "There must be something wrong with me." Same event, different emotional meaning. Your quality of life depends heavily on the meanings your mind creates. Here is a powerful shift. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" ask, "What story am I attaching to this?" That question changes everything. Because once you separate reality from interpretation, emotional freedom begins. For example, reality. Your idea was rejected in a meeting. Old mindset. They think I'm stupid. Healthier mindset. Not every idea will succeed. That's normal. Reality. Someone unfollowed you online. Old mindset. They must dislike me. Healthier mindset. People make random decisions all the time. Reality. You embarrassed yourself publicly. Old mindset. Everyone will remember this forever. Healthier mindset. Most people are too focused on themselves to care for long. The calmer interpretation creates calmer emotions. This does not mean pretending painful moments never matter. Some situations genuinely hurt, but suffering multiplies when the mind adds unnecessary meaning on top of pain. Pain is, "That conversation hurt." Suffering becomes, "I'll never be respected again." Pain is temporary. Mental storytelling prolongs suffering. One of the most freeing realizations in life is understanding that thoughts are not facts. Just because your mind says something does not make it true. The mind predicts disaster constantly. The mind exaggerates embarrassment. The mind imagines rejection. The mind assumes judgment. But many of those fears never happen. And even when they do, they are rarely as catastrophic as the mind predicted. Think about how many things you once worried about that no longer matter today. The presentation, the awkward moment, the rejection, the mistake at the time, they felt enormous. Now they are barely memories. Yet people continue living as if every small emotional discomfort is life-changing. This chapter is an invitation to stop giving ordinary moments extraordinary emotional power. Here are practical ways to stop taking everything personally. Pause before creating meaning. Ask, "What facts do I actually know?" Stop assuming people are always judging you. Most people are busy managing their own insecurities. Learn to separate feedback from identity. Criticism of an action is not criticism of your worth. Notice emotional triggers without immediately believing them. Feeling insecure does not mean you're inadequate. Stop turning temporary emotions into permanent conclusions. A bad moment is not a bad life. And perhaps most importantly, give people permission to misunderstand you. Not everyone will fully see you, approve of you, or agree with you. That is part of life. Emotional freedom grows when you stop needing universal validation. Reflection questions. What situations do you tend to take personally? What emotional stories does your mind repeat most often? How much energy have you lost reacting to assumptions instead of reality? What would change if you stopped interpreting every experience as a statement about your worth? You do not need to carry every opinion into your heart. You do not need to turn every awkward moment into emotional evidence. You do not need to believe every fearful thought your mind creates. Sometimes peace begins when you simply stop making everything about you, and when that happens, life becomes much lighter. The moment you stop chasing approval, something powerful happens inside you. Your decisions become clearer. Your emotions become calmer. Your confidence stops depending on other people's reactions. Most people spend years trying to be accepted by everyone, without realizing that constant approval seeking slowly disconnects them from themselves. Freedom begins when your self-worth is no longer controlled by applause, validation, or opinions. And the truth is, the prison of other people's expectations is often built quietly, one small compromise at a time. Chapter 3. The prison of other people's opinions. There are people who never truly live their own lives. They live according to reactions. They choose words carefully so nobody gets uncomfortable. They hide parts of themselves to avoid criticism. They constantly adjust their personality, depending on who is around them. Without realizing it, they become actors in their own lives. Not because they are fake people, but because they are afraid of rejection. Many people wake up every morning already thinking about how they will be perceived. How do I look? Do they respect me? Am I successful enough? What if people judge me? And slowly, life stops becoming about truth. It becomes about performance. This is one of the heaviest emotional prisons a person can live inside, the prison of other people's opinions. At first, approval feels harmless. Everyone enjoys appreciation. Everyone likes feeling accepted. But there is a dangerous difference between enjoying approval and emotionally depending on it. The moment your peace depends on validation, your freedom disappears, because now your emotions are controlled externally. If people praise you, you feel worthy. If people criticize you, you collapse. If people approve, you feel confident. If people reject you, you question yourself. Your identity becomes unstable because it is built on reactions instead of self-trust. And the painful truth is this: no matter how hard you try, you will never fully control how people see you. One person will admire your confidence. Another will call it arrogance. One person will appreciate your honesty. Another will feel offended by it. One person will support your dreams. Another will doubt them. Human perception is deeply personal. People see you through the lens of their own experiences, insecurities, beliefs, and emotions. So, if you spend your life trying to satisfy everyone, you will slowly lose yourself. Imagine a man trying to carry 10 different masks everywhere he goes: one mask for work, one mask for family, one mask for social media, one mask for strangers, one mask for friends. Eventually, he becomes exhausted. Not because being himself is difficult, but because pretending constantly is. Many people are emotionally tired because they spend too much energy managing perception. They carefully edit their personality. They overthink every message. They replay conversations. They worry endlessly about what others think. And most of the time, people are not even thinking about them that much. This is the strange irony of life. Everyone is busy worrying about themselves while simultaneously fearing judgment from others. A young woman posts a photo online and spends hours checking reactions. A man changes his goals because his family disapproves. Someone stays silent in conversations because they fear sounding foolish. Another person remains trapped in an unhappy life because they fear disappointing others. Little by little, fear of judgment becomes stronger than personal truth. And when that happens, people stop living authentically. They become emotionally divided. Part of them wants freedom, part of them wants approval. But approval always comes with a price. You must constantly shape yourself around expectations. The problem is, expectations never end. If you succeed, people expect more. If you stay quiet, people ask why. If you speak up, someone gets uncomfortable. If you change, some people resist it. Trying to control public opinion is like trying to control the weather. It never truly works. This is why emotionally strong people eventually understand a life-changing truth. Being misunderstood is not a tragedy. Sometimes people will judge you unfairly. Sometimes they will underestimate you. Sometimes they will criticize choices they do not understand. And that is okay. You do not need universal approval to live a meaningful life. One of the greatest examples of this can be seen in nearly every successful person in history. People admire them after success, but often criticize them during the journey. People doubted their ideas, mocked their dreams, questioned their choices. But if those individuals had obeyed public opinion, they would have abandoned their path long before success arrived. Fear of judgment kills more dreams than failure ever does. Because failure at least teaches lessons. Approval addiction teaches self-betrayal. Think about how many times you ignored your instincts because you feared reactions. Maybe you stayed quiet when you wanted to speak. Maybe you chose safety over passion. Maybe you avoided opportunities because you feared embarrassment. This is how invisible prisons form. Not through locked doors, but through psychological fear. The fear of being seen. The fear of criticism. The fear of not fitting in. But freedom begins when you realize something deeply important. People's opinions are temporary. Someone may criticize you today and forget tomorrow. Someone may misunderstand you without ever truly knowing your heart. Someone may dislike you simply because your confidence reflects their insecurity. You cannot build peace on unstable opinions. And the moment you stop constantly monitoring how you're perceived, your mind becomes quieter. You stop performing, you stop proving, you stop explaining yourself endlessly. You simply live more honestly. That honesty creates confidence. Not loud confidence, not arrogant confidence, quiet confidence. The kind that says, I know who I am, even if not everyone understands me. That type of self-trust changes everything, because now rejection hurts less, criticism feels lighter, embarrassment passes faster. Your emotional state stops depending on applause. There is a story about an old man, a child, and a donkey traveling through a village. At first, the child rides the donkey while the old man walks. People criticize them. How disrespectful. The old man should ride. So they switch places. Then others say, how selfish. The child should not walk. So both ride the donkey. Now people complain, how cruel to overload the animal. So both walk beside the donkey. Then people laugh. Why even have a donkey if nobody rides it? The lesson is simple. No matter what you do, someone will always have an opinion. Once you truly accept this, life becomes lighter. You stop wasting energy trying to become universally acceptable. Instead, you focus on becoming genuine. Here are practical ways to escape the prison of other people's opinions. Stop over-explaining your choices. You do not need everyone's permission to live your life. Allow people to misunderstand you. Not every false perception needs correction. Spend less time seeking validation online. External approval creates emotional dependency. Notice when fear of judgment controls decisions. Ask yourself, what would I do if nobody's opinion mattered? Build self-respect privately. Confidence grows through promises you keep to yourself. And most importantly, learn to disappoint people without abandoning yourself. Because if you constantly sacrifice your truth for approval, you may gain acceptance, but lose inner peace. Reflection questions: how much of your life has been shaped by fear of judgment? Where are you performing instead of being authentic? Whose approval are you still emotionally chasing? What would change if you trusted your own voice more deeply? The goal is not to stop caring completely about others. The goal is to stop abandoning yourself to satisfy them. You do not need to become perfect to deserve peace. You do not need to impress everyone to live fully. And you do not need public approval to trust your path. The strongest people are not those who receive the most validation. They are the ones who can still stand calmly without it. Your mind is a powerful tool, but when left unchecked, it can also become a machine that magnifies fear, stress, and emotional chaos. A small issue becomes a disaster. A temporary problem feels permanent. Many people are not suffering because life is unbearable. They are suffering because their thoughts constantly exaggerate reality. The good news is this: not every thought deserves belief, attention, or emotional reaction. The moment you learn to calm the mental noise, life stops feeling so overwhelming. Chapter 4. Your mind is making everything bigger. The human mind has a strange habit. It takes a small spark and imagines a wildfire. One unanswered message becomes rejection. One mistake becomes humiliation. One uncertain moment becomes catastrophe. And before anything even happens, the body is already stressed, anxious, and emotionally exhausted. Most people are not reacting to reality. They are reacting to imagined future pain. That is why overthinking feels so heavy. The mind creates scenarios endlessly. What if everything goes wrong? What if I fail? What if they judge me? What if I embarrass myself? What if this problem never gets better? And the more these thoughts repeat, the more real they begin to feel. This is how mental drama quietly takes control of life. The problem is not that the mind thinks. The problem is that the mind exaggerates. Imagine looking at your reflection through a distorted mirror. Everything appears larger, stranger, more dramatic than it truly is. That is what anxious thinking does. A simple conversation feels emotionally dangerous. A challenge feels impossible. An inconvenience feels overwhelming. The mind constantly adds emotional intensity to situations that may not deserve it. And because thoughts happen internally, people rarely question them. If the mind says, "This is terrible," they believe it. If the mind says, "You are failing," they panic. If the mind predicts disaster, they emotionally prepare for suffering that has not even arrived. But here is the truth. Most people never learn. Thoughts are not always reality. Thoughts are often emotional predictions shaped by fear. The mind's job is survival, not peace. It constantly scans for problems, risks, embarrassment, rejection, and danger. Thousands of years ago, this helped humans survive physical threats. But today, the brain reacts to emotional discomfort as if it were physical danger. A difficult conversation feels threatening. Public embarrassment feels dangerous. Uncertainty feels unsafe. So the mind overreacts. This is why people lose sleep over things that never happen. They mentally rehearse arguments. They imagine worst-case scenarios. They create future disasters inside their head. And meanwhile, life itself is still unfolding normally. A man waits for feedback from his boss and spends the entire weekend convinced he will lose his job. A student imagines failing before the exam even begins. Someone avoids speaking publicly because they already picture humiliation. The imagined suffering becomes stronger than reality itself, and this constant mental exaggeration drains emotional energy. Overthinking is exhausting because the body cannot always distinguish between imagined stress and real stress. Your heart races, your muscles tighten, your mind becomes restless, all because of thoughts. This is why some people live in permanent tension even when nothing terrible is happening. Their mind never stops creating pressure. But emotionally peaceful people understand something important. Not every thought deserves attention. Imagine sitting beside a road watching cars pass by. Some cars are beautiful, some are noisy, some are chaotic. But you do not chase every car down the street. Thoughts work the same way. Some thoughts deserve reflection. Others should simply pass. But most people grab every fearful thought and emotionally attach to it. That attachment creates suffering. For example, a thought appears, "What if I embarrass myself?" Instead of letting it pass, the mind continues, "Everyone will judge me, I'll look stupid. I'll never recover from this." Now anxiety grows. One thought became an emotional avalanche. The mind is incredibly persuasive when fear is involved. That is why learning to observe thoughts without immediately believing them is life-changing. Calm people are not calm because they never have negative thoughts. They are calm because they do not automatically surrender to those thoughts. They create space between thinking and reacting. This space is emotional power. There is an old saying, "You cannot stop birds from flying over your head, but you can stop them from building a nest there." Negative thoughts will appear. Fear will appear. Worry will appear. The goal is not perfect mental silence. The goal is to stop feeding every fearful story. Because the more attention you give anxious thinking, the larger problems begin to feel. And often, the mind suffers more from imagination than reality. Think about how many situations felt enormous at the time, but later became meaningless. The awkward conversation, the mistake, the uncertainty, the criticism. At one point, they consumed your thoughts completely. Now, they barely matter. This shows something powerful. The mind often overestimates the permanence of pain. Everything feels bigger inside the moment, but moments pass. And when you stop mentally magnifying every discomfort, emotional peace becomes possible. Another reason the mind exaggerates problems is because uncertainty feels uncomfortable. Human beings want control. They want guarantees. They want certainty about outcomes. But life does not work that way. Life is unpredictable, and when the mind cannot control uncertainty, it often creates stress in an attempt to feel prepared. But worrying is not preparation. Most worrying changes nothing except your emotional state. There is a difference between solving problems and mentally suffering about problems. Wise people focus on solutions. Overthinkers focus on possibilities of disaster. One creates action. The other creates paralysis. This chapter is not telling you to ignore difficulties. It is teaching you not to mentally inflate them because many emotional battles become smaller when viewed with perspective. Ask yourself, will this matter in 5 years? Am I reacting to reality or imagination? Is my mind creating drama around something temporary? Those questions bring clarity. Here are practical ways to stop your mind from making everything bigger. Limit catastrophic thinking. When the mind predicts disaster, ask, what is the most realistic outcome? Stop replaying situations repeatedly. Repetition strengthens emotional stress. Focus on facts, not assumptions. Fear often grows in uncertainty. Breathe before reacting emotionally. A calm nervous system creates clearer thinking. Simplify problems. Many situations are smaller than the mind presents them. Reduce mental overload. Constant social media, comparison, and stimulation increase anxious thinking. And perhaps, most importantly, learn to trust yourself inside uncertainty. You do not need every answer immediately. You do not need complete control to survive. You do not need to mentally prepare for every possible disaster. Most things work out far better than fearful thinking predicts. Reflection questions: what problems has your mind been exaggerating lately? How often do you suffer from imagined situations instead of real ones? What thoughts repeatedly create emotional stress inside you? How would your life change if you stopped believing every fearful thought automatically? Your mind can be a prison or a tool. The difference depends on whether you control your thoughts or your thoughts control you. Not every situation is a crisis. Not every discomfort is danger. Not every thought is truth. Sometimes peace begins when you stop making everything bigger than it is. And when the mind becomes quieter, life becomes lighter. Emotions are not enemies, they are signals. But many people spend their entire lives fighting what they feel. They resist sadness, suppress anger, hide fear, and feel ashamed of vulnerability. The more they fight emotions, the stronger those emotions become. Real emotional strength is not about controlling every feeling. It is about learning how to experience emotions without drowning inside them. Peace begins when you stop treating emotions like problems that must always be defeated. Chapter 5. Stop fighting every emotion. Most people are at war with themselves. They fight sadness, they fight fear, they fight insecurity, they fight disappointment. The moment uncomfortable emotions appear, panic begins. I shouldn't feel this way. Why am I still upset? I need to get over this. I have to stay strong. So, instead of feeling emotions naturally, people resist them mentally. And strangely, that resistance makes suffering worse. Imagine trying to hold a beach ball underwater. The harder you push it down, the stronger it fights to rise back up. Emotions work the same way. The more you suppress them, the more pressure builds internally. Eventually, that pressure leaks out as anxiety, anger, emotional exhaustion, or numbness. Many people think emotional strength means never feeling deeply. But true strength is the ability to feel emotions without becoming controlled by them. There is a huge difference. Emotionally reactive people are consumed by feelings. Emotionally healthy people allow feelings to pass through them. One resists, the other accepts. Acceptance does not mean weakness. It means understanding human nature. You're not a machine, you're a human being. There will be days when you feel uncertain, days when you feel hurt, days when fear visits your mind, days when sadness appears without explanation. This is normal, but modern life teaches people to fear discomfort. Everyone wants to feel good all the time, instant happiness, constant confidence, permanent positivity. So the moment difficult emotions appear, people assume something is wrong. But emotions are temporary weather patterns. They rise, they move, they pass. The problem begins when people turn temporary emotions into identity. Feeling anxious becomes, I am broken. Feeling sad becomes, my life is falling apart. Feeling fear becomes, I'm weak. And suddenly the emotional pain doubles, not because of the emotion itself, but because of judgment surrounding the emotion. A person cries and then feels ashamed for crying. Someone feels nervous and then criticizes themselves for being nervous. Someone feels lonely and then believes they are unlovable. Now, there are two layers of suffering: the original emotion and the resistance to it. This is why acceptance is powerful. When you stop fighting emotions, they lose much of their control over you. Imagine sitting quietly during a storm. You cannot stop the rain. You cannot command the wind to disappear. But you can stop screaming at the sky. Many people mentally scream at their emotions every day. I don't want this. This shouldn't be happening. I hate feeling this way. And the nervous system stays trapped in struggle. Acceptance sounds like, this feeling is uncomfortable but temporary. I can experience this without panicking. It's okay to feel human. That shift changes everything. One of the biggest misunderstandings about emotions is believing they must always be solved immediately. Not every emotion needs analysis. Not every sadness requires fixing. Not every fear requires elimination. Sometimes emotions simply need space. A man loses an opportunity he deeply wanted. Instead of allowing disappointment naturally, he immediately distracts himself, suppresses his feelings, and pretends not to care. Months later, frustration still lives inside him because the emotion was never processed honestly. Another person experiences heartbreak and constantly tells themselves, I should be over this already. Now healing becomes slower because self-judgment keeps the pain active. Healing happens faster when emotions are allowed instead of resisted. This does not mean becoming emotionally dramatic. It means becoming emotionally honest. There is wisdom in allowing yourself to feel without turning emotions into chaos. Emotionally mature people understand. Feelings are visitors, not permanent residents. Anxiety visits, sadness visits, anger visits, fear visits. But they do not stay forever unless the mind keeps feeding them. One reason people become emotionally trapped is because they fear vulnerability. They think, if I feel deeply, I'll lose control, so they numb themselves, they distract constantly, stay busy endlessly, avoid silence, avoid reflection. But buried emotions do not disappear. They wait, and eventually they emerge through stress, burnout, irritability, or emotional emptiness. Many people are not tired because life is hard. They are tired because they are emotionally suppressing too much. Suppression is exhausting. Pretending everything is fine requires enormous energy. There is freedom in admitting, yes, this hurt me. Yes, I feel afraid right now. Yes, I'm struggling today. Honesty creates release. Ironically, emotions become easier to manage once you stop trying to dominate them. Think about quicksand. If someone panics and struggles violently, they sink faster. If they stay calm and move carefully, survival becomes easier. Emotions are similar. Panic intensifies suffering. Calm awareness softens it. This is why mindfulness practices help so many people. They teach observation instead of resistance. You notice emotions without becoming consumed by them. You learn to say, I notice anxiety instead of I am anxiety. That small difference creates emotional distance, and emotional distance creates peace. Another important truth: not every emotion requires action. Feeling angry does not mean you must react aggressively. Feeling insecure does not mean you must isolate yourself. Feeling fear does not mean you should stop moving forward. Emotions are information, not commands. Wise people feel emotions fully while still choosing thoughtful actions. That is emotional mastery. Here are practical ways to stop fighting every emotion. Name emotions honestly. Saying, I feel overwhelmed, creates awareness instead of suppression. Stop judging feelings as weakness. Emotions are part of being human. Allow uncomfortable emotions to exist temporarily. Not every feeling requires immediate escape. Breathe through emotional waves instead of reacting impulsively. Most emotions lose intensity with time. Avoid emotional numbness through constant distraction. Silence and reflection are healthy. Separate emotions from identity. Feeling pain does not mean you are broken, and perhaps most importantly, give yourself permission to be human. You do not need perfect emotional control every moment. You do not need constant positivity to be strong. You do not need to hide your struggles to deserve respect. Real strength is softer than people imagine. It is the ability to remain grounded while emotions move through you. Reflection questions: which emotions do you resist most often? How much energy do you spend pretending to feel okay? What emotions have you been suppressing instead of processing? What would change if you stopped treating emotions like enemies? You cannot heal by fighting yourself constantly. Peace begins when you stop running from every uncomfortable feeling. Peace begins when you stop judging your humanity. Peace begins when you realize emotions are temporary experiences, not permanent definitions of who you are. And when you stop fighting every emotion, something beautiful happens. You finally start breathing again.